women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Hello, viewers. What a pleasure to be back with you again. So excited. So excited
good
to
to
be
see
together.
you. We have missed you, Cindy. We have
Oh,
missed you.
well, Ila, I'm back and I'm rusty. So we'll just see how this goes down because anything can happen. Like, how does this even work? So
There you go.
we'll just see how this goes. So I just wanted to start our program with, I was thinking about one of the ironies about being human is that we so enjoy our rest, and yet we're also only happy if we are to some degree, I think, struggling and striving and reaching for something more. And that's what goals are often about. And I found a really beautiful quote, an interesting quote here that someone has noted, and that is, "The hope of the world lies not in what one demands, lies in what one demands not of others, but of oneself." And so that really, to me, hit the nail on the head about goals. And I was just thinking how God gives us the free will to choose our goals. And so we're excited to talk about what He says around this topic and what we've learned so far around this topic of setting goals.
Mhm.
So forgive me when I'm rusty, Ila.
That's okay. That's
All right. Well, we thought it might be interesting just to kind of break the ice a little bit and talk about the big and little goals that we've had. And in our pre-chat, before we push the record button here, we both realized that really for us, a lot of our goals are projects.
Yeah.
In common.
And I start out with an idea and I start doing something and I work on it a little bit. And if it feels good and it's going along, it becomes a goal, but it does
Okay.
start out as a project. And then if it's not going well, it doesn't bother me then to say, I don't really want to do that after all.
Uh-huh. There's wisdom in that for sure.
Yeah. But now there are goals that are goals that, and they're spiritual goals that are not, let me see and see if this works for me. It's
Right.
100%.
Right. All right. Well, what have been, let's say, some of the small goals that you've had, the little goals that you've had throughout life? Ayla?
Well, to me now, I think of it as small, but it was a career. I always wanted to teach. I don't ever remember not wanting to be a teacher. And I got my education right away. I got a job. I started teaching when we moved. I got a job and taught. And even when it was kind of rough, some years weren't as good as others, but I continued until I was able to retire as an educator. And that to me, I think of it as a small goal because um, it's nothing compared to being a Christian, which of course was also my life goal, was to
Yeah.
live and to be a faithful Christian.
Yes, I guess earthly goals they are smaller, but wow, it's big that you would be an influence on all those children, that it was
Yeah.
an earthly goal, but so many goals are like that, where there's both spiritual elements and also, earthly elements of feeding the family and paying the bills and all of that. So yes, big and little goals. Well, I was thinking, Cami Bunting, I think it was, who made a really good observation recently about how when we are in our later years, like our goals are different. She talked about how we have more time to really dig into the word. And so I would say a lot of my earlier goals had to do with the fact that I was juggling homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not as accomplished as you are in terms of formal education and what you've achieved in your work life. So while you were doing all that, Ila, I was creating art. So while I would homeschool my children, I would make I don't know, thousands and thousands. I don't know if I can say tens of thousands. I might, but all this stuff that helped us just keep us afloat financially. So my husband preached, and we needed to do something. We would often host exchange students and that kind of thing. And so as the kids got older, and the empty nest started looking like it was materializing, I did run a marathon. That was a little goal.
Yeah.
The thing about that, it kind of overlapped in a way. I think it kind of changed how I thought about myself, and it kind of led to, I think it almost was building my character a little bit. Some people talk about the benefit of that, of building a stronger internal constitution. So I think that kind of played in it. Isn't it interesting, Ila, how one layer of your goals, maybe when you're in your 20s, they kind of prepare you for what you're going to accomplish in your 30s and your 40s and the things ahead. And that's been really fascinating. I mean, even on a biblical level, I think about Moses. He starts out as a shepherd. He's herding sheep, and then he's leading Israel. Or Paul's a tent maker, but then he starts building on the spiritual temple of God once he's converted. And Peter's goes from a fisher of men to, a fisher of fish to a fisher of men. And so we see this a lot, I think, as we mature, that there's this process. And so I think I've noticed that with my writing. So I would say that's kind of the thing that runs through all the way from my 20s, all the way up into the present. And it's just amazing how God built one thing after another. So I think even the homeschooling itself, like that was a review, like a slow crawl, a slow adult crawl again through the grammar and how to just write with more precision, because we were using a really good curriculum. I recommend Abeka video curriculum, and I learned a ton right alongside them. So I think I used a lot of that. And so I started writing newspaper articles and a lot of editorials against like moral issues in the community and that kind of thing. And then I started writing articles for David Posey's magazine, Focus Magazine, and then became editor for a while of a magazine called Sarah Seed. And so that demanded of me a little bit higher of a level of writing. And then I think I started at that point creating curriculum for children. So like over 4 decades, when I would teach different levels of classroom, then I used what I had learned about writing and combined it with my Bible study. And I wanted to mention some of these because some of these are still available on my website for free, nomadsyouandI.com, and maybe this would be some benefit. So that would include, I taught a class on teaching your children values. I wrote a book called Journaling Toward Moral Excellence, and those are available for free download. I was giving them away at my Florida College lecture. But it's a 100-page journal that you can download for your kids. And basically it's a scripture combined with a writing prompt. And so it's great for homeschool families. It's great activity for putting helping your children discover why they value virtue. And so that's, in the summer, if they're, maybe doing more of a public school or private school, it's a great summer activity or whatever. But there's 4 different levels: young writers, preteens, teens, and then college age writing prompts. And so that was a writing project. And then from there's another curriculum that I wrote called Now Fly. Back around 2009, there's a free download of that. And so that is really about helping that transition from high school into college age, whether or not, a young woman is going to college. But I would teach those to women, usually in the summer after their senior year of high school, Now Fly. So that's downloadable also at nomadsyouandI.com. That kind of led to, we taught a class of homeschooled high schoolers out in the community on the topic of sexual purity. And so a lot of that material kind of played in also to that Now Fly. And so, yeah, and everything from the screw tape letters, I did some material. I got kind of like a questions related to that book. And so then, Isla, some of this will start sounding familiar. 12 foundations. I wrote the 12 foundations material. I had no idea that OWL was going to come. And then 12 virtues. I wrote 12 virtues, and even the 12 joys that we are looking into, all of that was written probably, I don't know, anywhere from like 5-7 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
So it's just amazing to me. And the other funny thing, Isla, is that the whole time I was collecting quotes for, like, I had no idea why. I would read quote books that were like this thick. And then I would organize them like, oh, all these. And that ends up being so many of the memes, because I think I've done like almost 800 memes or something for Older Women likewise. So now I guess we'll talk at the end about what our current goals are.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of walk through that, not only because there's free material to be had, but also look so that women can be encouraged to look in their own lives of these things that you're doing in your 20s. They have this snowball effect that is so great for, you never know how God's going to use that as he's developing your skills and everything. So I thought we would, Isla, unless you've got anything to throw in here, maybe jump into a question that we want to invite our audience to join in as well. And
no, well, I just was going to tell you that, and I had said again before we started, that I have a tendency to look back and say, oh, I did that. I guess that was a goal of mine. It must have been important because I did it. When I was 60, I thought, it's so interesting. I've had 20 years as a kid being educated, 20 years raising children.
Yes.
And 20 years as my career of education, being a teacher.
Yes.
And then at 60, I was coming to my retirement, and I thought, well, I intend to be, my grandson said, call me a hit, 100 in training. And so that's what my goal is to live to be 100. But, the Lord has his own plan for me, of course. But I like how somebody will say we need to live today like we're going to live to be 100 and that we're going to die tomorrow, at the same time. But anyway, so I'm thinking the next 20 years, I want to be a worker in the kingdom, because hopefully from 60 to 80, I'll have a good ability, more physical ability to really work for the kingdom of the Lord. And then after that, I want to do like the recent quote from Jimmy Carter.
Okay.
That I want to do what I can, when I can, where I can, for as long as I can. And Beautiful. We never know, the older we get, we never know what we'll be able to do. But it's just, I call them my quinters. Like a quarter is a fourth and a quintet is 5. So a quinter is a fifth. So I have fifths of my life.
That makes sense to me. I'm tracking you. I get it. 20%, right?
20%, right. So, but I have that, I guess I had more, I had a goal when I was young of having a family, raising my children, being a teacher, but I never really, I guess, looked at individual goals, because some of it was just get through the days. We had a question from one of our readers that I thought we might, in fact, 2 questions. Is Abeka writing instruction, homeschooling, or Bible study?
Okay, good question. Good question. So if you Google it, it's going to be Abeka. And this is the #1, I believe. Now, my statistics might be outdated, but at the time we were using it, it's the #1 curriculum used in Christian schools. And so we happen to prefer the video curriculum, because that way I could make homeschooling this much of my life, not this much of my life, because I had a lot that I was juggling. So I think at the time that we did it, it was about $1,000 a year, which compared to Christian school is quite the deal. It came with all the books that we needed. It came with all the tests and quizzes, and you could actually get, I believe, kind of like accredited. You could get a diploma, or you could kind of do it on your own. So really advanced. In fact, my youngest, I believe, had her associate's degree before she was 18, because Abeka was advanced enough that she finished early and then went into community college. So if you have a real ambitious, bright student in your house, that may be something that you'd want to pursue. So we love the Abeka curriculum, but see, I kind of like heat and serve when it comes to curriculum. I don't want to make my own curriculum.
Right.
So a lot of people do some really great things by combining things up. So good question. On a practical level, I hope that's helpful for people. Yeah, Google Abeka, Abeka. They're out of Pensacola, Florida.
And one other question about the Nomads UNI, the curriculum downloads, the downloads for things that how do we find those again?
Well, yeah, if you just go down to nomadsuni.com, I believe that page is just called free downloads. So yeah, just go on down there. You'll see our podcasts. You'll see, I think, even a link to Older Women Likewise. All of the projects that we do for Nomads UNI, there'll just be links there, and one of them is just free downloads. There's the free journals there, and some other things I haven't even mentioned, like journals for grown-ups, even, with writing prompts and such. So good question. So
thank you.
Ready to dig into this question is thought about what biblical principles should be considered when choosing a goal to strive for in life. So I love that we're having Lauren Bassford coming on, and she talks about whose goals. And so that is something that I think is very, very primary. It almost, it's probably the number one thing, is that God's goals primarily need to be our goals. So it's such a reminder in Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." And so I also think about forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on to the goal of the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. So obviously that's the number one thing that we have in common, Ila, with one another and our listeners, is that we primarily focus on God's goals, right?
Right. And when I chose that life goal of being an educator, being a teacher, one of the major considerations for me was that I controlled my working space. The workplace was mine. It was my classroom. Generally, the rules were very godly. I mean, we didn't have, the language was a positive, good language, what we call no dirty words and such as that. The hours were wonderful. I worked Monday through Friday, never had to worry about being able to go to a worship service or a gospel meeting, or was off from school the same time that my kids were off. So I didn't have to, so for me, those biblical principles of raising my children and of worshiping the Lord and working for the Lord, those were ones that I considered when I chose that life goal of being a teacher. And you with with homeschooling and all, there you are. I mean, frankly, that I was jealous of that when you were talking about it. I was going, man, I wish I could have done that, because you had so much more time with your own children than I did. So,
you make a good point, Ila, that you don't always get to, and I think I'll be touching on this later too, is that there are certain elements of life where you're not getting your first choice of setting your goal. You're kind of handed a certain situation, and what's the best I can do to glorify God in this situation? Right. I can tell you, I'm super thankful for women like yourself, Christian women like yourself, that are out there in the public school, or were out there and are out there in the public school, being there to be an influence in those kids. What years did you teach, Ila?
I probably my first year teaching would have been like 74,
Okay.
74. And then my last year was 20, was it 09? Yeah, must have been 09.
09.
Yeah.
Okay.
30 years, and there was several years in there that I wasn't teaching, having babies, moving, or whatever. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it made a 30-year career. But yeah, there were, when I first started the teaching, and I was in the South, and that was much more
Oh,
Bible-ish,
mm-hmm.
and so, but most schools at the time, back then, were more likely to not to teach Bible in the school, but at least to uphold godly principles.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it has become really difficult for
Mm.
teachers in the public setting. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's hard. That's really hard. When a
Mm-hmm.
goal that is a goal that for your life and your career does not jive, for a better word,
Mm-hmm.
with godly principles and
Mm.
with your service to God, it's so unfortunate when that happens.
Yeah. Yes. The next point that I wanted to bring out, Ila, comes from Proverbs 3:5-6, that says, and I think it plays into what you're saying, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths, unquote. So even in our goal setting ways, when a desired goal comes into our mind, the first question must always be, is this okay with God?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and I can tell you before Mark and I traveled for 2.5 years, I wrangled that because that was priority number one. Like, I'm not going to throw myself into this, goal to go visit 100 conservative churches of Christ if this is not okay with God, So sometimes an earthly goal is sacrificed in order to accomplish a spiritual one. And if this has happened in anyone's life who is listening right now, I just want to say, well played. If you have sacrificed an earthly goal in order to accomplish a spiritual one. There's a quote that Jim Elliot said, and he said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." And that's often what happens when we find ourselves in a position where if we let go of an earthly goal that doesn't mean as much, then we're able to then accomplish a spiritual one.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see here. John 6:27 says, "Do not work for the food that perishes, but the food that endures for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you." So I think there's times where, you have to provide for your family, 1 Timothy 5:8. And so, you're on that level of survival, really physically. And so, but then there's other times where God's given you a situation where you do have the freedom where you could actually pursue something that maybe is more eternally relevant. All of our lives are so different, aren't they, Ila?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is handed different opportunities.
Right.
The other principle I thought about was from Proverbs 16:9 that says, "The heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." When I was thinking about that, Ila, I was thinking about what a reminder it is to be in prayer over what we're thinking of undertaking. Request of God his wisdom and discretion over it. After all, when you have a goal, you're trading your life for it, like your time.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking God, give me wisdom. Is this a goal that I should or should not pursue? Because time really is one of our biggest assets is time. And so a lot of wisdom in being prayerful over that. Any thoughts on that?
I think we have to continue to be led by the Spirit. And as you say, through prayer, there are some things that I've thought, this is exactly what I want to do. This is what I ought to be doing. But the Lord has put something in my way, or has shown me, something would be revealed to see, oh, no, wait, this is not the way I want to go. And there are so many things that have come to me that have become really important goals to me that I didn't go seek it out. The
Mhm.
Lord put it in my way, like this program, for example.
Exactly.
Our relationship was, we didn't know each other or know of each other
Exactly.
before, we were put together for this program, and it was just a phone call, but there are so many things that if we let God help us, if we really make that close relationship with Him, that
Yeah.
we will see a path
Mm-hmm.
that we can go, that will, fulfill His word and His goals for us.
Yeah. I mean, if you hadn't said yes to Older Women Likewise first, I don't know that there would have been a program. So, I mean, I thank you for that. And I think it's really an example too, Isla, when you did that, of taking on goals that are slightly more than your current abilities, or maybe a whole lot more, but so that your goal requires you to stretch and
Mm-hmm.
reach and grow. And now you're producing, and you're not only teaching on the program, but you're also producing it. And so it's just a really good example. And so
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that. Psalms 37:4 brings out another principle that I think might be useful for our listeners, and that says, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. So, because the desires of your heart will often be around things that are of eternal value, remember when Solomon was gifted anything from God that he wanted, and he asked for wisdom. And remember, God loved that so much that He also blessed him with what many others would have asked for, like a long life or a peaceful life or material comforts. And so, delighting yourself in the Lord, when we put that first, it's amazing how so many more goals kind of fall into place. I stumbled on a quote from Martin Luther King, who seems to have had this focus when he said, quote, "I still believe that standing up for the truth of God is the greatest thing in the world. This is the end of life. The end of life is not to be happy. The end of life is not to achieve pleasure and avoid pain. The end of life is to do the will of God, come what may." And I think you were speaking to that earlier at the very beginning of the program, Isla, when you had your quote about, like, I'm just gonna, whatever the opportunity, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like,
Yeah.
with what I have and where I'm at, and just do the best I can with what I'm handed
Yeah.
in life. Another biblical principle that could be considered when choosing a goal to strive after in life is found in Luke 14:28, where Jesus says, "For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it?" So this is really an important stage of goal setting. What is it going to take to pay for this? How long is it going to take to accomplish this goal? Where can I get the most cost-effective supplies? Because have you found this, Isla? The journey's probably going to be more difficult than you anticipate.
Yeah. Yeah. There are always
Times.
going to be more problems than you thought there were going to be, and
Yes.
there'll be an obstacle that you didn't count on.
Yeah. So when you're counting the cost, you got to kind of round up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have extra of all your resources that you think you're going to need, extra time, extra energy, etc. And if we count the cost, we're more likely to be able to finish it. And this is important to God, as we read in Paul's epistle to the church in Corinth regarding a donation that they had the goal of helping with, but they had not yet completed that goal. And there it says, 2 Corinthians 8:11, "But now finish doing it also, so that just as there was the readiness to desire it, so there may be also the completion of it by your ability." So count the cost. You'll be much more likely to land where you're aiming to land. And I guess one last principle, Isla, that I'd like to share about setting goals is it has to do with giving great thought and prayer to what the next wise step should be. So I don't know if you remember this, but in Proverbs 24:27, God says, "Prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field, and after that, build your house." So think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the principle here appears to be not getting ahead of ourselves. That is, taking the time to think about the sequence of your actions when it comes to goals. In this proverb, for example, the sequence happens to be, don't forget that you're going to need to eat. After you've ensured food, like go outside and, prepare your field, then you'll have the energy to build from there. So sometimes it takes years of groundwork as we inch toward our goals. So rather than throwing caution to the wind, by rushing in, just wisdom instead is very, very patient. And it's like, okay, what should be the first step here? What should be the second? And just getting all your ducks in a row that way as you're setting your goals.
Good.
You ready to shift gears a little bit, Ila, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Nope, that's good. You
All right.
good things there. And
okay, sweet.
I encourage our viewers to, keep this in mind as you're looking at what you're going to do with your life spiritually.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I just had a handful of biblical virtues. We want to talk about what biblical virtues are instrumental in knowing how best to conduct ourselves while striving for a goal. And so I thought I'd start with honesty, Ila. When it comes to setting goals, first we must be honest, because the truth is, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. In fact, Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. John 15:5. So the truth is that our goals depend on the strength that he supplies to keep us going, as well as a lot of other factors, not all of which are entirely in our control. Everything from our environment, where we were born, what resources we have, our God-given abilities, our God-given opportunities, God's even sustaining our health and our life. Sometimes it's whatever responsibilities that we've been given that we should not abandon. So we need to be honest when it comes to goal setting and tell ourselves the truth. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Too often I think we think we can do more than we can, or we don't think we can do something that we could if we just go step by step, like you said. Let's be honest about it.
Good point. Love that point. Yes. So I guess that leads to the next biblical virtue that I'd like to mention toward reaching our goals, and that is the virtue of humility. So in James 4:13-16, we're warned, come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go and do such and such in a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and we will also do this and that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So one element of humility is I think doing your research, Ila, like asking people in the know to tell you the hard truths about what you're considering doing. I like what you said at the beginning when you were like, sometimes I set off and I do this thing and it occurs to me, I change my mind, and there's a lot of wisdom in that. Proverbs 15:22 says, without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. So being willing to admit if your goal is actually unworkable, realistically.
Or if you've lost interest, or if your, who you are has changed from one circumstance to another, instead of just keeping on because I said I'd do it. Then just say, this isn't working for me. Changing up now. So
especially things that are morally neutral, right?
Yes.
Because your desire, definitely. I totally agree. I guess the last quality I'd like to mention is that of endurance. Obviously, when it comes to setting goals, this is a biblical virtue that really comes in handy when we're pursuing our goals. Philippians 3:14 says, I press on toward the goal of the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. So this is the key to our success, because so often achieving a goal is tedious. It's grueling. And that's why the Chinese have this problem proverb that says, a man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. Grueling sometimes. Polybius, do you know who this is, Ila? This sounds like an ancient Greek person.
It does.
I'm saying it right.
Greek or Roman. Yeah.
Reminds us of the endurance needed to obtain our goals when he warned, some men give up their designs when they have almost reached the goal, while others, on the contrary, obtain a victory by exerting at the last moment more vigorous efforts than before. So Mark and I always talk about this, Ila. We've seen a lot of people blow up their lives around age 60. I don't know what it is, but it's like they've put in decades of spiritual work, and maybe it's a midlife crisis later in life. I don't know, but we both looked at each other and said, hey, what do you say we do not blow up our lives? Let's not come this far and work this hard and then throw it all away, So endurance for sure. Yep. Almost everything worthwhile is really hard. So don't be fooled. The difficulty along the way. See, a lot of people think the difficulty along the way, they interpret that as an indication that the goal must not have been God's will. And that's not always the case. So, you look at the difficulties that Paul went through when he was preaching and teaching, and even Christ, that they were doing the will of God, and it was difficult, and they kept, they would hit like roadblocks and difficulties, and they just continued to push through. There's a quote that I found by Louise Brooks that says, anyone who has achieved excellence in any form knows that it comes as a result of ceaseless concentration. So that discipline, that we read about in 1 Corinthians 9:24-27, I discipline my body and keep it under control. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things, Paul says. So those were some of the virtues that I found that play into achieving goals. Ila, did you have anything to add?
Oh, before I do, we've got a couple of good comments. Karen Whitteman wrote, I'm studying Add to Your Faith this week, the scripture.
Oh, yes.
I've been in-depth researching perseverance. This really applies to when it's hard or we're being persecuted. Endurance, like you're referring to.
Absolutely, Karen.
That was the word that I used when I was making my notes, was perseverance. We just have to keep on keeping on even when it's really hard. Karen says it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes,
our goals, with goal setting. One of the things that I thought, and it's a saying that I have on my wall up here, that Rome wasn't built in a day. We often hear that. Well, I can't do it. Rome wasn't built in a day. But they were laying bricks every hour.
Oh,
and
every hour.
One time when I was working with teachers on a goal that the system had for us, they said, we can't do that. We just can't do that. I said, I know we can't do that today, but we can do this part, and we can do this part, and they can do this part, and we'll be set up and we'll be ready. One of the quotes I think that you had sent.
Yeah.
About, do you remember this about the plowed land? What was it? That we can't.
Oh, that we do plow the field first before you start building your house?
Well, no, that wasn't it. It said
okay.
we can't guarantee a crop, but we can at least be sure we've sown seeds on plowed land. So let's get everything ready. And so maybe we can't complete everything when we're looking at a spiritual goal. We say, well, I can't teach a ladies class. Well, no, but you could read a scripture, or you could call someone. You could do little steps, bits of it. And if it's available to you, if it's possible for you to do that, then bit by bit, you'll be able to. And if it's just not at all possible for you, you'll never be able to do this big thing, but you could do something. You could do it. And I think that is a biblical virtue, because we see so many examples where God tells us to do what you can do where you are. with
Yes.
what you can do. And that helps toward achieving our goals also.
Yes. I love that. I love that, Ila. I always learn so much from you.
Thank you. One of the things that I also came across and was talking with someone else
Yeah.
about is that if you wonder what your goals are, if you're
Okay.
not sure, you think, well, do I have the right goals? Check your calendar,
Okay.
check your to-do list,
Okay.
and especially look at your checkbook or your credit cards.
Oh, yeah.
What you're doing is what your goals are. And
Mm.
if what you're doing is not what your stated goals are, then your stated goals are wishes. You wish you were doing that,
Mm.
not that you are doing it. And
Okay.
that's tough. And I think, and that's one of those things where, I mean, it's looking at me too. I have to think, okay, if my goal is to be spiritual, but I'm doing this and this and this fun activity, am I really wanting to study? Is
Mm.
that really my goal, or is it my wish?
Yeah.
And we have to, put some action behind our goals, what we
Mm-hmm.
say our goals are. And we just
Mm-hmm.
need to examine ourselves. And that's something I pray for every day, for the Lord to examine me and for me to examine myself. And especially as I get older, am I real? Is that really what my goal is?
Yeah. Yes, because time, it's kind of like the law of scarcity. The older you are, the more you treasure time even more. And like, I am not wasting my time on a goal that does not mean a lot to me at this point.
Right, right.
So any
Um,
goals that you're presently working on right now, Ila?
Yeah, that was one when you had asked that question for us to talk about. I thought, oh well, I think so. I have probably my daughter and I tease each other about how many projects do you have going, and I'll go 20. And we're
Yes.
full of projects. We are big with projects. But the goals that my main goal is obviously going to heaven and making sure I am. But I kind of identify my goals as adding value. That's also a cliche, in education. We want to add value. But I'm trying to add value in my community. One
Yeah.
of my goals currently is knitting shawls for the assisted living, and because we live in a continuing care community. So we have an assisted living and a skilled nursing just right down the way, and so I'm knitting shawls for them.
Beautiful.
I'm knitting scarves for homeless that I send with Northerners who go back home, and I take these with you because we don't need them.
Beautiful.
And I'm also making fidget quilts for
Okay.
our memory care unit.
Ah,
And you have to look it up if you don't
okay.
know what it is. So, but it's for those with dementia
Okay.
that need to do something with their hands during the
Yes.
day. So, but that's one way I'm trying to add value in my
Yeah.
community. I'm adding value in our congregation
Mm.
by currently we're studying Between the Testaments by Gene Taylor. It's a
Okay.
workbook that's available on padfield.com. He has so many workbooks there and on that site. But this one is one I was really interested in. So Between the Testaments, obviously, that time 400 years without scripture.
Yep.
And we've been going through it. It's basically a history lesson. So I've been making PowerPoint for
Oh,
every
good.
lesson.
Oh, very good.
So that's a goal, and I've got 3 more lessons to go. So,
Good for you.
but I made that a goal to make a PowerPoint to bring in some more information, so it would not be
Yeah. Well,
so
I
dumb.
hope other people will be able to access your PowerPoint in some way. I love it when, you worked hard on that, and I hope people will discover that in some way where it's
Yeah.
shareable. I don't know if you sent it to the author. Somebody did a PowerPoint to go with your fresh start. And so now I advertise that. So
Oh, that's great.
maybe the author of that book will be able to, make use of your work.
Yeah. I also am, we're currently working on lesson plans for occasional students. And I hope in the future, when we get, in a few months, when we get it all complete, that we can do a program on it, because I think it's a program that would be good for other congregations like ours. And I'm sure you visited some, Cindy, where they're mostly older people, very few children. For us, we have no regular, only a couple of regular kids.
Okay.
But we do have students who occasionally come. And so we're working on program for that. So that's a big goal, that I'm trying to add value to the congregation. And of course, then it's also adding value to my home and my husband and my family. Just as things come up, that's my main goal, is to do that. And then I find a way to do it. So
such a nice variety. So a little bit of creative there, just a little bit of intellectual stimulation. And I like how your goals just really cross over into a lot of different communities and everything. And the symbolism of knitting something for someone is like a hug, you know.
Yeah.
If they know the love that went into that. I'm sure the homeless people and the people in the care center.
How about you? What kind of goals are you working on?
The biggest one right now is my 100 Churches project, and I am 24/7. I'm about 80% done with that.
Great.
Because I've written about 80 entries so far. So what this is as we were traveling, visiting Churches of Christ, I wrote many, encouraging, 100% uplifting, positive stories related to our visits. And so we're going to wrap that up this year, 20 more visits. So we're actually going to be traveling again in about a month. We're going to hit the road again and travel throughout the spring. And so the last entry will be in Jerusalem. Ila will be there too, my daughter. And so story number 100 that I will write will be about worshiping with the family of God in Jerusalem, where the church started so many years ago. And that's my book will end where the church was started so many years ago. So yeah, but that is an overwhelming project. I already have 5 in my inbox that I have visited, and I intend to write about them before I leave in a month. So that is still, I really appreciate you covering me during these 6 weeks of this little hiatus I did. But still I'm like you, Ila, I'm still kind of buried in my projects. But
yeah.
It's a happy buried. It's a happy buried, and it's all volunteer work, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess in conclusion, I'll just say to our viewers that Ila and I pray for your success in reaching whatever goals you are striving after in this life, and the beautiful things that will happen in this world and the souls around you as a result of your striving toward them. So remember, diamonds are only lumps of coal that stuck to their jobs, right?
Right.
BC Forbes said that, and so Ila and I believe in you, and we are cheering you on as you accomplish your goals to His glory.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Wonderful lesson. And all this month, we're going to be talking about goals. As Cindy said, her 100 Churches book is a goal. Next week, we're going to be talking about her lesson to the ladies at the Florida College lectures. And you talk to them about that goal, don't you, in that, that work you've been doing. So that's just really great. So tune in next week to see our review of that lesson that she did. In the meantime, please watch Answering Religious Error on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern. Watch on Wednesdays at noon. Bible questions and answers, wonderful opportunity for learning. And then listen each day, for those who listen to podcasts, to the Daily Answer podcast that Mark, Cindy's husband, does. It's a wonderful podcast, and it just is very uplifting. It'll be great. It's great for you and good for you to do. So, be sure to do that. Cindy, it is such a joy to be back with you, to have you back with us. And I'm just really looking forward to more of our association. So,
Oh, you got some great programs planned, Ila. You've been working hard getting
yeah.
that schedule filled up with some great conversations. Looking
Oh, I
forward to
hope
it.
so. I hope so. So, okay. Well, we'll see you next week then. Good night.